I like to introduce the three speakers, commentators, perspectivizers today. On the very right, Matteo Pasquinelli. He has attended the campus as a commentator on the seminar Geopolitics. He is a philosopher. He lectures frequently at the intersection of political philosophy, media theory, and life sciences. His texts have been translated in many, many languages, and he has contributed to a variety of journals and newspapers, just as Springerin, Multitudes, Theory, Culture and Society, Leonardo, Der Freitag, and many others. He wrote the book Animal Spirits, a bestiary of the commons, and curated the Italian anthology Gli algoritmi del capitale. In Berlin, he recently co-curated the exhibition The Ultimate Capital is the Sun, and also a symposium at the Akademie der Künste, which has been called The Metabolism of the Social Brain. Yeah, welcome, Matteo. Marco Amiro is one of the instructors of the Anthropocene campus and has developed the curriculum for the last 1.5 years together with us. He has taught the seminar Filtering the Anthropocene, together with Amita Baviska and Will Steffen. He is an environmental historian and the director of the Environmental Humanities Laboratory at the KTH Stockholm. He is one of the founders of the environmental history field in Italy, focusing mainly on the history of environmental conflicts over property rights and access to common resources. Also on the politics of nature and landscapes in Italian nation building, and on the environmental history of mass migrations. He is also an affiliate researcher at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra in Portugal, where he is a member of the team of the Marie Curie Initial Training Network in Political Ecology. And he holds, as far as I know, a permanent position as a senior researcher at the Italian National Research Council. Welcome, Marco. To my right, I welcome Herbert Lohner, whom we invited as an external guest to today's event, but actually he also followed the campus during the last days, and in particular the seminar Valuing Nature. Herbert Lohner studied biology, forest science, and philosophy, I think a very interesting combination, in Munich, Vienna, and Berlin. And he works as a consultant for nature conservation for the Bund für Umwelt- und Naturschutz, Friends of the Earth in Berlin, for now more than 15 years already. So he's an expert in questions on ecological protection, and also in, he works a lot in different and varied political contexts. Yeah, welcome. I give the word to Matteo, who will start.
Thanks,
we'll take care about timekeeping. Thank you.
Thanks, Cordo, for the introduction. Probably to break the ice, I would like just to bring a kind of practical account of what you just said. What is the surplus of the Anthropocene? For me, there is like this no way back to what have been traditional form of knowledge politics also in relation to the environment. I mean, we've been using the last decades also to form of local politics, local activism, form of even, as you are familiar with, urban ecologists, urban environmentalism, urban gardens. What the surplus of the Anthropocene is the attempt to produce a sphere of complexity, a complex sphere that actually is the only way probably through which today we can deal with the whole planet. And this is a sort of, for me, of silent success of this event. It's like a way also, and this attitude is also, in my opinion, crossing other components of the society nowadays that maybe they don't discuss the Anthropocene, but have the same approach, the same perspective. The relation with nature, we are no longer naked in the relation with nature. We are no longer naked also in the relation with capital. There is a complex machine, there is a vast machine, as Paul Edwards has described in his book, that was discussed also this day. There is a vast machine, there is a technosphere that is also permeating our life, and this is a global sphere of technology, of culture and knowledge. So for me, this is probably the best way to describe from my point of view, from a political point of view also. There's also my political opinion, sincerely, what is the surplus of Anthropocene of this sort of paradigm shift, also in relation to agency, of course, because this precisely the fact that agency cannot be any longer, as I said at the beginning, just individual agency or form of very localized, very particular form of action. I don't know. Should I talk longer, or should I pass maybe to...
You can have your initial statement, like the 10 minutes, as we
10 minutes?
foresaw.
Okay, that was only
Procedure.
3 minutes. Sorry, okay, keeping...
A lot of surplus.
Yeah.
Surplus.
No, what's interesting for me is precisely the surplus, as I try to describe, is the description of a complex paradigm. And I say complexity in a positive way, not in a negative way or in a fatalistic way. In the group, in the working group on the technosphere, we describe precisely the fact that everything we do today, our relation with the world, our relation with knowledge, is mediated by this technosphere. And this technosphere is composed by different levels. It's, of course, have been analyzed what is a crucial component of the Anthropocene is precisely the energetic flow. What is the energetic budget? What is the energy metabolism of the whole planet and our industry? There is also a material flow, a material component of any form of matters, atom, materials that have been transformed by humankind. There is also a technological level, a kind of technological lineage and evolution that have been crossed human history. And there is also an economic level, economic flows of money, capitals, and so on. So the Anthropocene is this technosphere where all these flows, all this lineage are combined in a sort of complex machine. And the fact that who wants to give a description of this world, of the Anthropocene, of this technosphere, decoupling one of this flow, decoupling one of this lineage will make the whole paradigm and the whole discussion fail. So it's not possible to precisely to discuss the nature of this world, not looking at the energy flow, at the energy budget, at the energy consumption. Like it's not possible to look at the history of this world without looking at the transformation of capitalism, form of power structure, and so on. So this is one of the things that, I wanted to underline. And I guess for me this should be enough as an initial description. And I have also some comment related to the geopolitics group, but maybe we discuss later when we go to more material example or historical example. Marco.
Okay. Yeah, you can rather take this one.
Okay. Okay, very well. So when Cordula invited me to be part of this panel on agency, I thought that I was supposed to speak about travel agencies. And I am a kind of big expert in the field, so I feel a little bit disoriented now. But by the way, I have to tell you that at the Environmental Humanities Laboratory in Stockholm, we have started just now a project on the traveling scientist, in which I hope we will be able to show that actually there is some kind of connection between our way of production of knowledge and our traveling and the Anthropocene, but I don't think that this is the subject of my small talk today. So I will speak about the other agency, not the traveling one. And to speak about the agency, I would like to raise here two main paradoxes, and then say something more generally about power and agency. So the first paradox is what I would call the paradox of agency without control. So while becoming a geological force, humans are actually losing power or control, if you wish, over nature. Humans are changing the planet indeed, but on the other side, at the same time, humans seem to be unable to manage this change. They cannot control it, at least not now. Therefore, human agency in the Anthropocene is of a very strange kind. Of course, there is a tension towards reappropriating some kind of total agency, of total control, what we could call an agency with control. And this is, I believe, the geoengineering dream or nightmare you know, it depends on your point of view. The second paradox that I would like to bring on the table is what I would call agency without subject. The Anthropocene is the age of humans, we said. So in the Anthropocene, we have the agency of humans as species on one hand, and on the other, we have the responsibility of the individual. No? There is a lot of talking about, you know, you have to act individually, you have to consume less, you have to change your way, the individual way of life. So in the Anthropocene, it is either the universal we or the individual I. It seems to me that collective identities are completely missed, at least many times in the Anthropocene. So I wonder who will act or react? Or just to be more explicit, as the people in the campus know I like to be, who is going to be the revolutionary subject in the Anthropocene? Because if we believe that the Anthropocene is a problem, well, generally speaking, when you have a problem, you need a revolution, no? And in the very literally sense, you need to change the trajectory in which you are going. I want just to quote here an example. I think that this week, if I am correct, this week, William Connolly has published an article calling for what he calls a cross-country citizen strike for the Anthropocene. But calling for this cross-country citizen strike, he was also saying very explicitly, I don't know who's going to do it. I don't know the subject to do it. So, just to conclude, power and agency in the Anthropocene. I have tried to explain during this week that I believe that we need to uncover social inequalities and hierarchies in the Anthropocene. To paraphrase a German philosopher I am kind of stuck with, all humans have agency, but they cannot act as they pleased. I believe that that German philosopher was referring mainly to nature, to what, you know, the environmental conditions. So humans can, actually he said men. There was no, you know, politically correct talk at that time. So men can make history, but not as they pleased. Well, I think that it's not just the nature, the environmental out there, but there is also something related with social context. The neoliberal narrative says that you can vote with your feet or your pocket. But this individualization and marketization of agency, well, this works only for those who have enough resources to enact it, those who have shoes and money in the pocket, we might say. I am not saying that the people living in the Villa Inflamable in Buenos Aires or in the Jardim Gramacho in São Paulo, in two favelas, I mean, do not have any agency. I don't mean to say so, but it is this agency, I think that this agency is limited by the social structure in which they are in. So my final remark is that maybe agency is not so much, I would like not to see agency so much as an inherent quality of a subject, but rather as a process. So I think that agency is in the struggles that, I think that it is in the struggles that an actant subjectivity is shaped, and it is in a conflictual relationship with power that the limits of a subaltern rebellious agency is created and negotiated. And I think that this kind of process probably is much more useful to exit from the Anthropocene rather than some kind of ontology.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Some weeks ago, I got a phone from Cordula, and I was invited to speak here, and I can't remember if I was happy at this moment. But my first question was, what is she wanting? Okay, I'm responsible for nature conservation in an urban area. And I learned I'm an agency. I will give you some impressions about different identities of agencies. There's, on the first side, you can look to agencies as a form of agency machine. That means an agency is something like a receiver of interests and informations, is processing these interests and information, is storing them, and then is sending it out, these interests and informations. And in this process, on the one hand, the agency is something like a knowledge generator, and on the other hand, is reducing knowledge. For example, on the one hand, is collecting scientific information, but is processing the scientific procession data into an information tool for policy. That means reducing complexity. These are two different activities of agencies. And for agency, naturally, there are a lot of questions. Who defines the job? What are the interests? Who were the creators of the agency in history? Do they have still the same identity at the moment? And are there any changes? And on which way interests and informations are coming to the agency? That means how the agency is influenced. And this is a little bit a mechanical picture of agency. And on the other hand, there's a second identity. You can name it the sensible agency or the learning agency. That means in this working process, agency is on the way of transformations, always. And this means also that the message is influencing the messenger, not only the message coming in, also the message sent out is influencing the messenger. And at the end, the third identity of agencies, you can say it's in a way a pregnant agency. What does that mean? A pregnant agency is an agency enabling the birth of new agencies and creating new agencies, creating a system of agencies. And this means you must be very open-minded and open-minded to create such processes. And this means it's an ongoing process of emancipation in society and in the work of an agency. And practically, there's a process from representative democracy to participatory forms of democracy, and maybe, dangerous word, total democracy. The results, there are new forms of agencies, new forms of communications and interaction. For example, a little bit crazy, at the moment in Germany there's a book, The Internet of Animals. That means a lot of plants and animals were equipped with sensors, and computers are communicating with the computer of the people, of the scientists, and also together. And there's an Internet of Animals. Is it emancipation? They are showing us new worlds, or is it total slavery? I don't know. But it's total transparency. Is transparency good or bad? I don't know. Something still was said that in the Anthropocene there's one different point. That means this the whole world is an absolutely intended world. That means there's, you said it, this geoengineering fantasy, and to me, coincidence and chaos is in politics and social systems and also in ecology a very, very mighty factor, and also in theoretical ecology, in new theoretical ecology, coincidence and chaotic processes are very, very important. That means a totally intentioned world means totally ruled. That means global dictatorship on the one hand, on the other hand, global government. And is it true or is it not true? And is it good or is it not good? And so there are a lot of questions. And in this development of agencies or systems of agencies, there is one thing very important. That means, do we need agencies for commons? That means not only agencies for nature and so on, for man and so on, that do we need agencies for commons? And at the end, it could be a nice view to look back from post-Anthropocene and form maybe a post-Anthropocene fairy tale, Once Upon a Time, and look back to our discussions here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. I would prefer to open the floor for questions and answers, if there are any right now, this moment. Yeah, okay. So we start right away.
Oh, great, thanks. I'm struck by the fact, I like the word agency a lot. The presentations so far are all centered on human agency, asymmetry. It seems to me what we need to do is extend the word agency to nature. If we think about performance, we can say humans are agents, nature, everything else in the world is an agent, the world is a lively place, and our agency is tangled up with the agency of the world. And it seems to me that's the way to get the hang of the Anthropocene in our present condition. And it seems to me that's what the Anthropocene is actually teaching us from a different angle. And I'd be glad to know what you thought of that.
Shall we collect questions? Maybe, yeah? Okay. Then that was Amita Baviska and then...
She wants to
Okay.
add on this.
My question actually directly follows from that. I completely agree that I think maybe the idea of agency needs to be extended to think of actants. And following Marco's commentary, and I agree with you, Marco, about the need to think about agency with subjects. But what if we extend the subject to not only think about subaltern subjects, but to think of the resistance provided by nature? Not nature in as some sort of sentient being, but certainly not as an inert entity against which men make history. So if we think of invasive species, disrupted endocrine cycles, if we think of, electromagnetic radiation or the ways in which, global hydrology is changing, where is the agency of all of this as it shapes human actions and possibilities?
Okay, we take a third question.
Well, the question actually follows from this too as well. And I would say if there are two words that populate every paper on the Anthropocene that I've read in the past 5-6 years, and that regard agency and different ideas of agency, are entanglement and complexity. However, if there are two words that I also find in another kinds of papers, which are papers written by Chevron, Shell, Monsanto, Barrick Gold, every time that I'm reading their declarations about how an event of contamination and violence was not their responsibility, there are the words entanglement and complexity. So my question is, what's the relation between a shifting notion of agency and a shifting notions of attribution of causality and responsibility?
Okay, yeah. First round of answers.
Okay. Why me? Okay. Well, for sure, I am pretty weak in recognizing the agency of non-humans. I believe that the first thing that I should say is this. It's, it's my background, it's my filtering, it's the philosopher I am stuck with. I agree. I think that it's kind of difficult for me. Nevertheless, so first of all, let me say that I agree with Amita that it's true that nature, in a very broader sense, can be recalcitrant to the biopolitics of governance of global capitalism. And you can see that in many ways. You can plan, you can do urban planning, and then you will discover that it's not acting as you thought. There is a wonderful article written by Mike Davis on, I think the title was Good Reason for Letting Malibu Burn. And it was the idea that, if you build incredible houses for Hollywood superstars in the middle of of the charpal, right, of the bushes in the Hollywood Hills, well, you will get fires, Nature fight back, there's no way. Nevertheless, the story that Mike Davis tells in that article is that you get also other kind of fires, the urban fires in the inner Los Angeles. And while you get, a very ready and efficient response, public response for the houses, the villas of the super rich, you don't get the same kind of answer, of response for the burning down of the poor, in the immigrants, especially in the inner Los Angeles. So the question would be, I agree that nature can be recalcitrant, and I think that we need new alliance, and we need to think broadly about this alliance. I am ready to be allied with the trees and the forest, but I also think that we need to set our political agenda. And I would say that I am also at least, I think that we should be at least careful about, letting people speaking for nature, because it's really important. I don't want to be misunderstood, it's really important, but it's also dangerous. Because the people who are saying that they want to build new atomic power plants, they're not, nobody's saying, I want atomic power plant because I want a lot of money and I really hope that you will die very soon by radiation. Generally, they say, we want to save the climate. I know, you have ever met somebody who will say, okay, I want to build a new condos because I want to do a lot of money? Generally, no. They will put together, some very strange narratives. So we need a political agenda, and so I believe, I think that this is up to us, and for us, the rebellious, recalcitrant, revolutionary subject, and not whatever we wish to think of.
I don't know, I would like to say something new maybe, also to myself, that has not been. But in relation agency, I have the feeling that a human being, probably any organism, has been always composed by forces that don't belong to the description of its own identity in organism. We can bring the example of the endosymbiosis through which, according to Lynn Margulis, the cell was started to develop. We can take the example of all the microorganisms that compose our body, and so on and so on. We have been always inhuman in our relation with technology. We are always composed by the technology, our clothes, our form of the symbolic form you use, alphabet, culture, and so on and so on. So we have been always somehow non-human in our thing. The point for me is precisely when we describe maybe too much this non-human form of agencies in a romantic way. My point is precisely what is the political vector when we take this description, our relation with non-human form of agency. To me, one of the most interesting form of a non-human agency is capital. Capitalism is this inhuman force, this kind of automatic subject able to accumulate capital like a vortex, moving like a hurricane, moving money like a hurricane through the globe. Also, Marx was defining once capital as an automatic subject. This is controversial because capital is not an automatic subject, it's our responsibility. So. But it's interesting how, okay, so technology is a non-human form of agency. We are made of the same kind non-human ontologies. But what's interesting to me today is also capital as a form of non-human agency, and also sort of superior form of a collective identity, almost an autonomous form of intelligence. So it's interesting for me also, non-human agency, non-human object, subject, actant. What about non-human's form of intelligence? This would be an interesting question for me. But maybe it's moving from...
Yeah, any further questions? Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking about what Mauro said about the, we seem to be in the Anthropocene suspended between a universal we and the individual I, and where is collective agency, where will the revolutionary subject come? And it made me think about some of the graphs we've seen a lot of the great acceleration, the energy use, population growth and everything, and the way that the vertical axis is always this sort of abstract quantity. And is there some problem about the way we talk about, for example, energy, if we look at the energy curves since 1850 and the exponential curves, the way that hides all the shifts between different forms of energy. So do we need to kind of de-abstractify a lot of these categories we use to form these graphs so that we can be more sensitive to, for example, the way that the shift from one energy source to another involves a social struggle, and and is often motivated by forms of struggle between capital and labour to try to weaken the power of labour, etc. That's the argument of Andreas Malm and so on. So is there something about those abstractions that we use to constitute the Anthropocene which renders invisible the points at which the real genuine situated collective agency of the Anthropocene could be taking shape, but is somehow under the radar?
Further comments, contributions by now?
So I can take this minute to say something. I completely agree, of course, and I also love Andreas Malm's work on this subject. For instance, I was thinking, why, when we try to describe the Anthropocene, the curve of the Anthropocene, the great, why we don't include, for instance, the increasing in private property and the erosion of the commons? For us, it's very easy to talk about, energy consumption and so on. But what about the ways in which we have reduced other ways of owning or accessing nature with, all the careful that we can say, but this is something, and I was also following you. I think that the commons are actually one of the producers of, new subjectivity. And I am not completely sure that the issue here is to resist, only to resist to the privatization of commons. I believe that there is a lot going on in the creation of new commons, enacting new commons. According to Massimo De Angelis and Silvia Federici, Massimo De Angelis is a political theorist and Silvia Federici is a feminist scholar. The commons are precisely the places in which a recalcitrant new form of politics in the Anthropocene can be generated, no? And so I think also the way in which we narrate the Anthropocene is interesting. Why don't we speak about private property and commons in the Anthropocene?
One remark. Nowadays, there are heavy discussions around the topos ecosystem services. That means in Germany and worldwide there are different TEEP studies, and I think this is dangerous because ecosystem services are based on capitalistic instruments, sites, views, and with this instrument you move into a discussion system which is not democratic controlled, or not so much democratic controlled as, for example, other systems. And there's one point in German nature conservation law. There you can find different aims. And one aim is you have to conserve nature because of the intrinsic value of nature. And this topos, intrinsic value, that's a little bit crazy, is never discussed in nature conservation scene in Germany. So I don't, but maybe I don't read it. Or if there are international discussions about this topos, intrinsic value of nature.
Want to comment on that, or any further contributions, comments,
I am
questions?
trying to avoid the obsession with the microphone that the speakers are so we're killing any possibility for the audience to say anything.
Okay, not at the moment. But what I would find interesting is, once again, to look back at the campus of the last week and just get an idea of how questions of agency have been dealt with in different seminars, perhaps, because the three of you have followed on different topics, different seminars, different constellations, and that might be an interesting comment.
I would like to, because Herbert before was talking about how a form of activism, local activism, produce knowledge. And he was also referring to this transformation of political activism in the last decades through representative politics to, which was the other, representative democracy to participatory democracy. And in the geopolitics group, we discussed this history of activism and how activism emerged following the post-68 wave, and now how activism was this attempt precisely to deconstruct, to go beyond centralized form of power, and how society, European society, was like so permeated by all this molecular form of politics called precisely issue-based activism, specifically environmental activism and human rights activism and so on. As an interesting to me how, we define this as a sort of NGOization of the society. Also, of course, the 68 wave was behind the proliferation of NGO. And NGO have a specific role of agency within the Anthropocene and any kind of climate issue. Specifically, in this campus, we've been discussed many examples of human rights, NGOs, environmental NGOs, and so on. The examples are many. But it's interesting how today, this NGO are specifically employed in zone of conflict, zone of, with, of course, tension, natural disaster, any form of emergency. And they are precisely when we try to map these areas, we see between, let's say, the population and the war perpetrators, between the population and nature, we see this kind of in-between area of NGO that are there like a sort of also as machines of knowledge. They produce a kind of understanding of the local territory. And for me the curiosity was precisely which kind of knowledge they produce, which kind of mapping they make in the places where they start to operate. And the fact that this form of knowledge, this data, this information they produce can be used by anybody, and it can be used by us, can be used by superpowers, can be used by corporations. So it's interesting to see how also this form of European activism then started to permeate other parts of the world, and specifically the zone of conflicts outside Europe.
Okay. So. First of all, something about this problem of the ecosystem services and the idea to put a price on everything, no? So in political ecology, there is a wonderful expression, which is the incommensurability of values. There are some ecological conflicts in which you cannot put a price on, in which you cannot evaluate the cost-benefit analysis. If a corporation wants to destroy a sacred site for some people, how can you put a price? I mean, can you put a price on your religious belief? It would be kind of difficult. So I agree with you, and the issue of incommensurability is part, I think, of this. In our, I believe that our course was pretty much about agency. I think that what we have tried to see was precisely the kind of agents involved in the Anthropocene and placing them away, in a way, into some kind of hierarchical powers, because somebody said that we might think about the Anthropocene as the Russian dolls, no? Which, no, I think that it was a way to represent a more holistic way to think of the Anthropocene, which is really important, I agree. But, I mean, immediately, to me, the idea was that in the Russian doll there is one, bigger, who's eating, actually, all the others. But maybe it's just my obsession to see this kind of things. So, yes, we were, and actually, what I was mentioning, the idea of agency, not as an inherent quality, but as a process, was something that was coming out from the discussion in our group. In political ecology, many times we are in love with local communities, whatever they are. So there is, the bad guys arriving, generally a corporation, can be something else, and then the community resisting. And I am a big fan of resisting communities, as you can imagine. But there is something strange in this, no? We essentialize the community. It's the community, no? So you have a lot of, we are able to see a lot of hierarchies, powers, and identities in our world. But then when it's the community, sure, it's the community. Everybody, Well, you can recognize this. And on the other side, it's true that many times, and I am going to close with this, many times it's not that the community was there waiting for the bad guys arriving. Maybe it's precisely in the struggles, in the environmental and social struggle, that a new community is arising and is becoming an actant subject. And I would say that sometimes there is also a rediscovery of nature. In my own case studies in Naples, in Italy, the communities created around the issue of waste, of garbage, they were not, communities already aware of the relation between the urban and the rural environment, the consumption patterns, the waste. They became an expert community in the struggles. So the struggles are actually producing local knowledge. And so, and I would say, kind of alternative, maybe subversive knowledge. So this was coming out from our group.
You just mentioned the question of local, global. I would, as a last point, I would like to bring the question of agency once again to the question of scaling. And I think Natalie Jeremienko, yesterday evening, she said in a discussion, in a table talk, knowledge can scale, but agency doesn't. And I think it's a question, really, of how to think about multi-scalar ways, actors, whatever, or how could this supposed dispersed we of the Anthropocene be thought in a productive way? So who is this we? Is it dispersed? Can it be made productive, or can it made, dispersed into something? That was a question which came up yesterday, and I think it is an interesting one. Yeah, one could follow up. Yeah, and there is another comment.
Actually, it's a question of scale, but scale in time. I'm just wondering, when do we become an agent, and the role that education play in this? So I'm just going to take an example. So we were talking about private property and the commons. So as a kid, I was given toys. I was brainwashed into the private property mind in a way, because I had my own toys. And now there's libraries of toys, so the new kids are learning a much more commons type of behavior, I would say, or mindset. So I guess it's an hopeful message, but we can actually change things, but with addressing the question of the when. So when do we become an agent?
Okay. When you become an agent, well, yes. Well, I hope not. Are you going to answer this question for me? No. It would, well, so let's try. I was hoping we should be more organized, you know. So anyway, so I mean, as I said, I believe that it's in the struggle. This is pretty much my idea. As I said, I don't think that it's an inherent quality. It's more something, it's a process. And sometimes you lose also your agency in a way, and you decide to, you know, to give it to somebody else, you know, which is very common. I would just say that I agree with you that we need hopes. And especially we need to organize hopes. We don't need individual hope. Because this is something that is very, you know, just turn on the television, you will get a lot of hope. But maybe we need to organize hope. And there is a very nice article written by Michael Hart, the philosopher working with Tony Negri on multitude, empire, and commonwealth. And he said that, I mean, the leftist scholars who have been very, very good in criticizing, you know, capitalism, the system, and so on, but we didn't actually provide many times an alternative. But on the other side, there has been work done in this direction. I can mention here the community economists collective led by Graham and Gibson, for instance, now looking precisely for post-capitalistic words, because another word is not just possible, it's actually also in place if you don't kill it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have 3 questions. One over there, then the woman up there and here. Okay.
There's this moment of agency that I'm really interested in with respect to geodesign, and this kind of came up, or geological engineering. This came up earlier. And there's this moment where researchers, scientists who are working on geoengineering solutions to the climate, they understand that the technologies that they are trying to make operative will have uneven effects in the world. And they understand that this is probably going to be a big political problem for everyone. People are not going to appreciate their work if they find themselves on the losing end of these kinds of massive alterations, design interventions into the climate. But nevertheless, they feel that they can go on producing the knowledge, so for instance, of like dumping a bunch of iron into the ocean or emitting this, you know, enormous quantity of you know, aluminum or sulfur into the atmosphere, simulating volcanoes to change the climate, and kind of sort of leave the political question to someone else, as if the production of knowledge itself does not, is immune from questions of agency. As they can be researchers and they can produce that knowledge, but they don't need to deal with the question of what kinds of knowledge they bring into the world. They don't need to take responsibility for bringing knowledge into the world. You know, and I think that might also be something to reflect on in terms of the knowledge that we bring into the world here.
Okay, thank you. So, over there.
Hey, hi. I was curious of your opinion of what do you think about like focusing on environmental issues as health issues and as environmental issues to kind of reframe the global discourse as using health as a unit for value, or even just, I really like the question of when do we become an agent? So we all have the agency, right? We talk about it, but what my experience is working with communities is that people start to care when actually they affected, as you said, through own struggles. So I'm curious about that. Thanks.
Okay. Then here. So we have 2 minutes left, so to say. It's really, we take 2 last questions. Thilo afterwards, okay.
Yes, hi. Misha Vete, poet and painter. In my poem called The Mental Revolution from 2010, I tried to give Olivier, when do we become an agent, an answer. it starts saying, and I say it in German and for security reason and try to translate. Sie findet uns, die Revolution des Geistes, wann immer wir bereit dazu. So it finds us whenever we are ready for it. And the problem then follows, it's less a poem than just a credo, saying, ist sozial und zeitlich verschoben. It's sort of the overlapses of social and in time. And that's basically one of the problems. So we live maybe in the 21st, some of us in the 23rd century, while others still believe in 15th and 16th century at the same time. And yeah, I think it's really depending on each of us that we are really responsible for what we're doing. And then again, a lot has been correctly asked, what is the we? So to define that we are all basically belonging to each other in the same boat on one planet, that this becomes a stronger feeling. I think these 2 points are important.
Okay, so, and it's Thilo, the very last contribution, please.
I have the feeling that often in the discussions, also during the campus, we think about agency, something that is there, that is changed, that belongs to things, people, nature, and we try to understand how that agency has changed in the Anthropocene, how we should think about it differently. And I wonder whether it would make a change if we conceive of agency not as something that is there that someone has, but rather as something that we create, construct, and assemble. I think I totally agree with geoengineering. To me, the biggest fiction within that is not actually the notion of the control of technology over nature, but it's actually the fiction of that unified subject acting on the planet and the impossibility of creating that subject, of assembling that kind of agency. So that's one aspect. And I think in the context of, it restores the power. If we think of capitalism not as something that is there, that has changed agency, but as something that we constantly construct, produce, as a matter of acting, then it immediately poses the question, how can we assemble different agencies that can counter that project or do things differently?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. As I said, unfortunately, we have to close by now, so we have strict timekeeping here in the hearings. Thanks to all of the speakers for your participation. Thanks for your attention.